Hey Volha, I hope you're doing well. This is Greg doing a code review of the CSV file application, task 1. So going through here, it seems to be working after a few tweaks, which is really good. I'm going to go through some sort of standards that we do in Java, and I'm going to go through some ways that not only will it be easier to write, it will also be a bit easier to read, and I'll just go through some tips and tricks to make things more consistent and robust. So the first thing is I mentioned that it's not quite working, and that is because obviously this one is perhaps fair enough. It's just hard coding the this directory on your computer, which is completely acceptable. But obviously on my computer I have to change that. So even if I do change this to where the data actually is, so if I go to here, you can see that I'm actually in the correct directory and the file data CSV does exist. And if I try and run it again, it's still going to fail. Now why is it going to fail? Because the path is correct and that file does exist. Get rid of that backslash just to make this even more clear. That shouldn't make a difference. Now the reason this fails is because this will work always on your machine, but I'm actually using Linux. And so the reason it's failing is because this here, this is for Windows. Windows uses double backslash, whereas Linux uses this. So if I just replace that, run it again, we then see it's successful. So wouldn't it be great if we're running on a Linux system, we could use a Linux path, and if we're running on a Windows system, we could use a Windows path or Mac or Solaris, whatever we're running. Now there is actually a way to do this, so we can do this using the paths. So what would be better is if we created a new item, path, input file path equals paths.get, then we could put in directory path plus input file. Sorry, let me just turn off these pop-ups. Cool. And now we'd have to refactor the program, but that would work. This is I'm not sure what version of Java it came in at, but now this will, if we use this path and then we do input file path.get, so you can get the file system to that return Linux, or get root, get parent, get file name, basically all these different things. So I think this is a much better way to do it, and this facilitates both Windows and Linux. I won't go too in depth with the path stuff because that can probably be, I'll maybe send you some links to that, but that's something for the future. And also because this was hard coded, I'll go back to the start. So because this was hard coded, I also think it would be better if this was read in through the arguments of the program. So here we pass in, every main has this parameter string args, right? And then we can, again, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, maybe this is just me repeating what you already know, in which case I'm terribly sorry, but here we can put in program arguments. So here, sorry, my computer's just frozen. So here we could put in, blah, 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 directory, etc. And maybe that would work better. Because then people could easily customize, and it's more clear that they have to set something up. Because obviously I'm not expecting everyone to have it in the same location on their computer, but then it's more clear that they have to customize it where it is. So that's good. I actually have one more thing to say about these. It's great that you've made them final because they don't change. But typically in Java, for constants like these, we do something where we don't actually put them inside the body of the method. Because if they're going to be used multiple times, we would put them up here. Again, maybe something you're familiar with. Private static, or if we want to share them, we can even make them public, because we don't encapsulate static stuff usually. And then this name correction is correct. This is called snake case, so that's great. And we'll change this one also to directory path. And in this case, we might not want to make this final because we might want to initialize it once it boots because of the arguments. But That's getting a bit pedantic here. This is mostly fine. Rename all occurrences, just changing the cases there because we want to keep a camel case. So that was. I also have my caps lock on, so. Cool. CSV file processor. Yeah, this is fine actually. I think this is completely fine. Creating an instance of it. List of company country. I'm not sure I like this variable name. Again, I don't know how variable names are very important to companies. Maybe I'm repeating. Sorry if I'm ever repeating myself. I'm just going to go ahead and say it anyway, just in case, because obviously I don't know exactly what you know. Variable names are sort of very important. So list of company country doesn't really convey to me what I think is going on, basically. Like I don't know what that means. List of company country. I would think that would maybe be, you know, list string, because this could also be list of company country, right? This would just be, well, I wouldn't say list specifically because this is already a list. So what I would probably say is just company countries. But that's not really what things are, right? That's not really the task, and that's not what you're producing. So maybe what we should call it is, I think this ends up being the sort of the rows, right? So we would call this country, companies grouped by country. So this could also work. I think there's actually a neater way of storing this. I'm not sure how familiar you are with these collections, but I think if we were to use, if you know much about maps, we could use a map, and then we could use a string. So this would store the countries, and then inside we have a set and we have string. So what's this? This needs to import map as well. So this is the same thing, obviously. So companies grouped by country. Or we could call it country, companies. So that works, I think. And then this, so basically if you don't know what a map is, this is basically we store each country one time, and then for each country we store a set of every country that falls under that company. So this way we will only have, I can't remember how many companies, different countries there were. 1, 2, 3, Mongolia. That's surprising to find in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Seems to be. So England, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 companies, 6 countries, and so we'd only have 6 entries in this map. And inside of those sets, we'd have, you know, multiple. But the thing is also maybe a string doesn't really say much about what it is, and it also doesn't limit much about what we're doing. So if you're familiar with the concept of enums, you can go here. Create a Java class. I'm going to call this country. I'm going to make it an enum. And under country, I can then create a number of these enums. So what I'm doing is I'm specifying these are the valid inputs. So if we go and look at this output, we can say none, England, Germany, Guernsey, Mongolia, Poland, Scotland, and United Kingdom. What we'll have to do here is have to put an underscore. And then, so now we are basically, we've got these finite values, and then so if someone puts in a country, let's say, because if somebody entered a country and they called their country, you know, fake country or something, fake blah blah blah, then we wouldn't be able to figure out which one of these it is, and we could probably figure out that this was an invalid input. So we're specifying that there's a number of these countries that we want to accept. And then what we could do is we'd find some way to convert them from, I mean, most of them share the same name, so you could do some logic where if I want to use one of these here, I could just do country.England or country.none. So then what we could do is, because these countries are limited, we could put a country here. And now what we've got, this is much more clear what this is than this. If that makes sense to you. We should also use a set, because there's no point in having duplicate countries, and a set ensures that things are unique. So to me, this is a lot more clear, and I'll just leave this data structure as example for now. I'm not going to go through and change the whole program, but I think maybe there's different approaches here, but I think that's definitely one good way. So I'll send you some links if you're not familiar with maps, or you're not familiar with sets or collections or enums. Maybe I'm laying it on a bit heavy, but I think this is good stuff to look into, because this is the kind of thing that makes your code quality really good, and using these collections just makes things a lot easier for you and for people changing your code. So I'll delete that for now. And this here, this is really good. I'm glad you used this collections.sort. It's a great method. Rather than trying to write your own sort, what a waste of time. Someone else has written it much faster than I could ever write it, so why would I bother writing my own? So we have this comparator. That's just pretty ugly and kind of complex, I think you'll agree. That we've got this like public, we've created a new inner class, and then we like instantiate and override, and this is the bit we want, right? Ideally, wouldn't it be ideal if we could only have this? So I'm going to make a few changes here. Turn this into a lambda. So Java 8 introduced the concept of lambdas, and maybe I'll go into them in more depth later, because I think they're very, very useful. But for now, let's just do this. What we're going to do is we're going to pass in, this is called a lambda, and I'll send you a resource to all of this, and then we can just take these two. This can be O1, O1, O2. Then we can get rid of this method here, and the return. I need to figure out the exact syntax of what's going on here. Here we go. So now it gives me the option. Once I've set the language level, I can actually just replace this, because it's going to give me the option to just do replace with lambda. Then, so this is replacing it with a lambda. So you see, let me get this previous one up. So it used to be like this. We used to have to create this class and then override this method. But this actually takes a lambda, which is basically a method on its own. It's like a function as data. So I'll explain this further, because lambdas can be quite complicated, and I think they're very useful, but for now, I think it's probably, this is also a bit confusing, I imagine, using this, like, creating an inner class, and like, why do we need to do all of this? So for now, we'll just leave it at this. There's an easier form of doing all of this, and I can actually make it even more simple to do this, basically. So this is a reference to a method, and because as a parameter to here, this is get to a parameter, a comparator, and this, it's all set up for you, basically. You don't have to create your own logic. Does this return anything? This list, yes. No. Void. Okay. So I'll talk through this another time, but let's change this to item, and this just makes things a whole lot neater. And it has exactly the same effect. Okay, so once you've sorted everything, you go into let me look into the read data line by line, because I kind of skipped over that. company. This is also unnecessary. We don't need to, we can infer the generic here because we already declare that this is going inside. So we don't need to, when we say new array list, we already know it has to be this, so we can actually just get rid of this, which makes things a little bit neater. CSV reader, new CSV reader builder. This is OpenCSV. OpenCSV, yes. This is why you're using Maven, because I've used OpenCSV before, it's very good. That's it. Input file path with skip lines, build, next record. It's saying that's redundant, but I think that's fine. So clear at least. Next record 8. I think this is good, but if I'm reading through this and I'm saying, if for example, I know what these columns are referring to, but if I don't know, it's like, okay, what does 8 mean? And then I'll have to open up the CSV, I'll have to go, okay, so column 8, I think if I go to, sorry, go to column 8 and then I have to like read through and okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because things might change, right? The file's format might change and all these in the future, and you never really know what could happen to your code. And I understand this is just an example, but what we can do is to make things a bit simpler, we can create a constant int, and so this is country, country index, and then we can put that as 8. And then instead of putting 8 here, we can put country index. And now it's much easier for the person to, oh, okay, so that's the index they thought the country was on, but now it's changed because maybe they didn't know the purpose of this. You know, maybe they thought you're trying to get another column or whatever. So there's actually an easier way to do all of that. What you can do, I'll show you here, is you can just, IntelliJ has lots of great functionality, and this is one of them. You can just do introduce constant. So if you hit Shift Control A, you'll get up this like little menu that lets you search all the actions in IntelliJ. And if you type introduce constant in this little box, like that, and then you can type in its name. So I will call it country index. And I will do the same for this. Company name index. Array list, arrays this list. You should just be able to do this, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but this should work. There we go. So that was again, that's fine. It's just you're creating an array list by passing this in as an array, but if you actually look at the method contract here, this already passes back a generic, I won't get into that, but it passes back a list basically. So it's already passing you a list, so you don't need to declare that. So we can actually just get rid of this, as it's a little bit redundant. And then there we go. And also replace these. Exception. Yeah, return list of company country. I've already been over that. I won't repeat myself. Cool. Back to here. And then we do the comparison and output deletion file. So you. Oh, I see. So file deletion. Yes. This is fine. I think maybe if you want to follow this path, I would call this file deleter instead of deletion. Again, maybe that's. But what I would actually prefer to do is go into here and make this a static method. So then we're using it as more of like a util, and we don't have to create an instance. We can just do file deleter. Delete file, and then we don't have to create an instance of it because this is a util method that we don't really have any state inside the file deleter because there's no fields up here. So we're performing a method that is kind of self-contained. So what we want to do, I think, and again, there's arguments to be made on both sides of this, but I would personally just like have it static because then every time I want to use this method, I don't have to create an instance of it. And it could be the same with this as well. We could just have CSV writer. And some people might disagree with me about this, but I think this is, and then we can just get rid of that too. So I hope that's been helpful. I'm going to write up a sort of list of questions. I'm not sure if I'll have loads and loads, but hopefully you might know the answer, you might not. It's just a case of finding out what you know and sort of cementing that, and maybe hopefully if I ask a few of the questions you'll have to look some things up and it'll cement the knowledge. So great, I will get this uploaded and I'll send you the link.